sorry. Okay. And these are all things that I am going to posit today are found in Judaism, whether it is through our text or through our practice. And given that Judaism, I think, as you all know, has a history of sort of tsuris, of trial, of tribulation to a certain degree, one of the questions that I keep coming to is whether these aspects of Judaism are a response to our communal tsuris, or are they a feature of the faith? Would they be part of Judaism, whether or not we had endured hardship as a people? And so this is sort of an overarching question that I'd love for you to consider as we go through. Not that we're going to stop on every aspect and try and suss it out. I certainly have my theories, and I welcome some disagreement. So as we kick things off by talking about playfulness, there are a couple of things to point out. So one is that playfulness is actually found as early as the Tanakh, Jewishly. So it says here in Proverbs 8:30 through 31, King Solomon speaks in the voice of the Torah, which is already a kind of a playfulness, the fact that we animate the Torah. I, the Torah, was the artist's plan. I was his, God's delight every day, playing before him at all times, playing the inhabited areas of his earth. My delights are with human beings. And this translation from the Hebrew original is based on the wisdom. Oh, hold on. Excuse me. As I try not to, oh, good grief. Thank you for being patient and bearing with me, is based on the wisdom of the first page of the ancient biblical commentary of the Midrash Rabbah. So that what's being said here to a certain degree is that part of what the relationship between Torah and God is a playful one, that the interaction isn't necessarily just God speaks and Torah is the manifestation of that, but that there is, I wouldn't say a game because I don't like the idea of the manipulation there, but there is a joyousness, a playfulness, okay, that is already built in. And for those of you who study Jewish texts, you know that they love puns and they love joy, which of course brings us to this notion of Jewish humor. And one of the things, just to tie into the polyvagal theory, that humor can do is it can lead to improved performance in circulation and lungs and muscles, and it helps us cope with stress and adversity, and including bereavement. And it gives positive attention and admiration and increased creativity. So I want us to think specifically about the concept of Jewish humor. Before I sort of continue on, anybody in particular want to try to posit what is Jewish humor? You're going to be shy? Okay.
I think that Jewish humor is very self-referential, making fun of the cliches, Jewish mothers, guilt, striving towards, high education, my one son is a doctor and one's a lawyer, and oh, this one wants to be a rabbi, how horrible, right? Like that kind of self, making fun of ourselves before other people can make fun of those things.
Right. And I think it's really interesting. The pieces that you point out, they can be, right, the Jewish mother or the stress on education, right? Those things can be stressors. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're taking the bite out of them, taking the stress out of them. I think you're right. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit from the big book of Jewish humor, some aspects that we may find in Jewish humor. And while we may not think of this as religious, I would argue that this is fundamental to who we are as Jews. I don't think that we would be the same kind of Jewish community, not BHSS and not Judaism writ large, without our sense of humor. So it's usually substantive, it's about something. It's especially fond of specific topics like food. Noshing is sacred. Haha, sorry, I love the puns. I love the puns. Okay, good. Family, family business, anti-Semitism, wealth and its absence, health and survival, It's also fascinated by the intricacies of the mind and by logic, and if the short elliptical path separating the rational from the absurd. Um, as social or religious commentary, Jewish humor can be sarcastic, complaining, resigned, descriptive, it's broad. And sometimes the point of the humor is more powerful than the laugh it delivers. And for some of the jokes, the appropriate response is not laughter, but rather a bitter nod or commiserating. So sometimes the idea is not to laugh out loud, but to strengthen the bonds of the people or to recognize a common trouble. Okay. Jewish humor tends to be anti-authoritarian, which I think is fascinating. It ridicules grandiosity and self-indulgence. One of my favorite Jewish jokes comes around the high holidays. I know a lot of you grew up in congregations that were not necessarily Reform, and so maybe you remember a part of the service where the rabbi and the cantor are sort of beating on themselves and self-prostrate and all of this. This is one of my favorite jokes, you know, and then the cantor is praying up to God. I am not worthy, give me strength. I am not worthy, let me lead this people. Great, great, great. The rabbi does this, I'm not worthy, give me strength. Then the beadle comes up. Do you know what a beadle is? The person who takes care of the shul traditionally, right? Sort of the caretaker, as it were, but it's often a part of the congregation. He says, I'm not worthy. And the cantor looks at the rabbi and says, look who thinks he's not worthy, right? So, right, it's that sort of humor of anti-authoritarian, like, let's not take ourselves too seriously also idea, and the dignity and worth of the common folk as well. Jewish humor frequently has a critical edge, right? It creates discomfort at making its point. Often its thrust is political, aimed at leaders and other authorities who cannot be criticized more directly. May God bless and keep the czar far away from us. Exactly, right? These sorts of jokes applies to prominent figures in general society, as well as those in the Jewish world, such as rabbis and cantors and sages, intellectuals, teachers, yada, yada, yada. Not to use too much Jewish humor. A special feature of Jewish humor is the interaction of prominent figures with simple folk and the disadvantaged, with the latter often emerging triumphant. So we root for the underdog, even through our humor. And then the other thing is that no one is immune. Jewish humor mocks everyone, and that includes HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? That includes God, right? The humor is an equalizing power as well. So one of the things that I want us to think about with this in the context of polyvagal theory is when you laugh or even when you tell a joke, where do you feel it? Where do you recognize it? Do you know what I'm asking? Yeah, okay. Randy's not sure if he knows what I'm asking. Yeah, Bila, what were you gonna say?
Well, I feel it in my gut. And what I feel with something, if you're under a stressful situation, humor helps you relieve that stress.
Exactly, exactly, right? We feel it in our gut. We feel a release.
Yeah.
We feel a release of tension. I'm thinking of, you know, sometimes even uproarious laughter when you've released some tears, even, you know, that kind of laughing, and it allows a letting go, right? And that's all part of this re-regulating potentially. Okay. Anybody else want to share um, where you feel it when you laugh?
I feel it all over.
You do.
And as a matter of fact, if it's a real good joke, I forget where I am. You know, I become part of the joke.
It takes you outside of yourself. I love that.
Yeah.
Barbara, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say the term belly laugh.
Yeah. Which I don't think is too far removed from belly breathing, right? Also, and the kinds of laughs where you have to catch your breath and it makes you do that deep breathing sometimes. Absolutely. Yeah. Arlene, what were you going to say?
Well, I think of the 2,000-year-old man, you know, that record with Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. And it just, it's so funny and it's so Jewish. And it just breaks you from whatever, sadness or stress, it just totally breaks it. And it just makes you feel so happy and
Yeah.
proud to be Jewish.
Yeah.
And I was going to also say political.
Mm.
My father's cousin started out with the Jewish Daily Forward.
Mm.
They're political cartoonists for decades.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah, Lauren, what were you going to say?
When you smile, and our psychological professionals in this room will tell me if I'm right or not. Isn't there like the fake it till you make it? Like when you just start smiling, you already start feeling happier, and that feeds on its own self.
I'm seeing nods. It's interesting. I've been reading a little bit about what do they call it? Toxic positivity. And so yes, there is a fake it till you make it. And I also think that part of what this joking and what this laughter does is it allows all of this to penetrate and permeate without being as painful, right? It takes the edge off. Yeah, Nora?
I think also when you're in a group and you're afraid, you start kidding around and it releases the fear when you're
Right.
embarking on something.
That releases. Joel?
Yeah, I was taught years ago when you were in a marathon or you had a very difficult physical feat to achieve, you should smile. Like when you're running up a hill or biking up a hill and you don't think you're going to make it, smile.
And what does that change for you when you do that, Joel?
I think it helps.
Yeah.
It helps you get to the top of the hill.
Interesting. I think maybe that relates to optimism too, but which we will talk about also. Pam?
Well, I think also when you look at polyvagal, when you laugh, it activates your body. So then it's the opposite of the immobilization that you might feel. So you can laugh to counteract the dorsal vagal immobilization. So that I think is a piece of it too.
Sort of the opposite of the stiff upper lip, as it were. Yeah. Stacy?
Yeah, there's a there's a professional. I met her at the biennial 2 years ago, where she does laughter yoga, where the point is not to tell jokes to laugh. The point is to laugh, right? They laugh on purpose, not because they heard something funny, because of all the things you're saying. And then the other thing that I thought of, because I tend to think in lyrics, is what Joel was talking about being afraid, and for Nora as well, is that song from Mame. Whenever I am afraid,
your heart is breaking.
no. Whenever I am afraid, I hold my head erect and whistle a happy tune so no one will suspect I'm afraid.
It's not from Anna and the King, or the King and I.
Oh yes, it's from The King and I. I'm sorry, it's not from Mame. It's The King and I. I apologize. But that idea of faking it so you make it with humor, with, I'm sure you're going to get there, with music, to kind of trick our bodies to have a different reaction to the stress we're feeling.
So I think that's exactly right. And one of the things, sort of from a meta perspective, that I want to have is this concept that our textual intellectual Judaism, our cultural Judaism, and our bodies actually work together, that I don't think we can separate them, which incidentally is one of the reasons that it can be hard when somebody, for example, is a new Jew to fully be embraced by Judaism, because these components are so vast and all encompassing. And it's not to say that people can't or they shouldn't try, they absolutely should, and we should welcome people. And it can be challenging because these pieces interlink and they make us who we are as people and also as a people. All right, so we talked a little bit about humor. I want to move on a little bit to the idea.
Can I make a comment about Jewish humor?
Yes,
Can I make
please.
one comment about rule number one? Just like in rule number one of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Rule number one for a non-Jew who marries into a Jewish family is you don't tell a Jewish joke at the dinner table. Even if you heard such a good one and it's pro-Jewish, and it doesn't matter. Just never ever tell a Jewish joke, even if you become a Jew by choice.
Oh no! I feel like you have to.
Listen, in the long run, it's still wiser to stay away and let somebody else tell the joke.
Well, so
you
I'll
know?
tell you, Mark, one of my favorite Jewish jokes is the non-Jewish mother joke, right?
Okay.
So here's
Oh,
how this goes, and
okay.
we'll see who laughs, okay? So the non-Jewish son calls his mother and says, "Mom, I'm so sorry. The baby's sick. I have to work late. We're not going to make it to dinner on Friday night." And she says, "It's okay. We'll reschedule." So, okay,
I like that. That's great.
non-Jews don't get it
Yeah.
usually. So, okay, moving right along. Okay. Okay. Oh, yes, exactly. Seinfeld says, yeah, Tim Watley converted to Judaism for the jokes. I have heard that before. All right. So the next thing, after we talk about humor and playfulness, is to talk about the rhythm of rest. And one of the things that I want to show you, this is essentially a Jewish calendar. Okay. And right now, as you know, we are on this line right here in Shavat, right? Or Adar, actually. Adar is over here, but that's where we are. And what's hilarious is that you're like, oh, look at all of these opportunities to rest. And it feels so stressful how many times we have to rest. But that the holidays are very intentionally, by the way, distributed around the year. And you will see that almost like on a color wheel, right? That across the year, there are significant holidays that balance out the year. So that Pesach is almost exactly opposite in the year to Rosh Hashanah and Simchat Torah, right? That we have the holidays to sort of even us out and to put into place a rhythm of rest. As you know, there are some holidays where we are commanded not to work. There are other holidays where we commemorate the holidays without necessarily being commanded to rest. For example, Hanukkah is one of those kinds of holidays. And that as different holidays sort of crop up, Yom HaAtzmaut is one that I'm thinking of, for example. It was very intentionally put on the calendar in a place where it would potentially have a counterbalance, or where there was an open spot, not already something taking the place on the calendar. And so you'll notice that, like, for example, Tu B'Shvat, which is the holiday of the trees, almost counterbalances with Tu B'Av, which is sort of the Jewish Valentine's Day. Some of us have heard of it, some of us haven't, right? But these are holidays that have a different feel than necessarily the heft, the weight, the substance of Pesach or the high holidays, for example. But as you know, as you know, Shabbat fundamentally is part of the rhythm of rest, the weekly, right? And remember, if you need anything, I'm available 24/6. We're back to our Jewish humor. We work on weekdays, and the rest on this, the work on weekdays, and the rest on the seventh day are correlated. The Sabbath is the inspirer. The other days are the inspired. If you have read Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath, then you know that he really thinks about Shabbat in terms of time rather than space, and really thinking about rest as fundamental to what Judaism is. There is another quote, this time from A.J. Jacobs: "This is what the Shabbat should feel like, a pause, not just a minor pause, but a major pause, not just lowering the volume, but a muting. As the famous rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel put it, the Sabbath is a sanctuary in time." So I want us to think about, what does that mean, a sanctuary in time? So traditional Judaism, so when people are dedicated to rest on the Shabbat, the work that they do is different. So we already know that a lot of people don't go to work or don't do their day-to-day job on Shabbat. But when we say rest in this context, what we mean is not, crawl into bed for your Shabbos shluff. That's wonderful also, okay? But what we mean is shifting our mindset so that it's not unusual in traditional households to study Torah, to study Talmud on Shabbat, to avoid talking about the work week at all. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the other thing just to keep in mind is and again, I don't know if you all have been reading the same articles that I have, but there's this whole new thing, oh, I don't know if it's that new, coming up now as we're a year into the pandemic, of the 4-day work week, that now we know that we don't have to work as long necessarily to accomplish all of the stuff that we intend to accomplish. One of the things implied in Shabbat is that you should work the other 6 days, that there has to be something that you rest from. And that there is value in work, and there is something about self-worth when we work, and that when we value our work, we also recognize that it is incumbent upon us from time to time to stop working. And so one of the questions that I have for you is whether, and then it's really not a judgment at all, it's whether there is anything that you do that makes Shabbat different from the rest of the week for you. Randy, did you have an answer?
Usually by Friday, I'm completely wiped out, like by Friday night, Saturday morning. If I'm not asleep, I'm not really doing anything connected to work or anything like that. And it's not, sometimes there are days where I'm thinking, if I get this done on Saturday, then I don't have to rush Sunday night to get it all done before Monday morning. But I tend to just naturally procrastinate. And I think really that's what it is, having a 2-day weekend. You get to procrastinate because of Shabbat.
Interesting. Okay, so having the 2-day weekend gives you the chance to take maybe a more true Shabbat, as it were. All right. I mean, it's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of friends who had been trying not to use electronics on Shabbat before the pandemic hit, and that fundamentally had to shift over the last year. And I would say that one of the ways that many Reform Jews, and I'm looking at a lot of you, and a lot of you are our Shabbos regulars, that one of the ways that our Shabbat is different from the rest of the week is by the people that we connect with, right? Or even by getting together and praying together as a community, right? We do some positive interactions rather than taking away for Shabbat. Maybe we still leave our phones on, and maybe we'll still talk about that thing that's frustrating us at work, but maybe we'll add candles, and maybe we'll add a different friend group. Maybe we'll add, I don't know how many of you sing on a day-to-day basis at home, but on Shabbat, I think a lot of us in the modern world, Shabbat is one of those few opportunities we get to sing out loud, right? That's not the shower, for example.
Rabbi, our pandemic Shabbat, our pandemic changed our Shabbat considerably, because pre-pandemic, I worked almost every Saturday because of my job. And then I was furloughed for 3 months. And then when I came back, I didn't have the same expectation to work on Saturdays. And so Fridays, we tend to plan our meals for the following week, Friday later in the day. And Saturday morning, we get up and we take our walk, and then we go to Costco, and then we go to Wegmans, and then, but that's become our Saturdays. Like, it's become a routine that we didn't have before, because my life didn't support it.
But I love this day that was designed to nourish your spirit has also become a day designed to nourish your body, right? And it's the way that you plan for the rest of the week. So I have to say, Stacey, I love the beauty of the parallel that on this, the seventh day, God ceases from creation, and one of the things that you're saying that you're doing is you're getting ready for the next week of creation, whether that's through shopping or whether that's through planning. And I think that that's spectacular. That's beautiful. Yeah, Lynn.
I live with my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grandson, and my son-in-law is Scottish and not Jewish. And very early when they moved in with me, I had a tradition with Rick, my late husband, of doing prayers and the whole bit with the candles. And at first, Simon couldn't figure out what this, he didn't understand Hebrew, and he was like lost. But I also gave a family blessing. Now he would not miss. I mean, even when I was sick with COVID, he demanded I come downstairs and give the family blessing. I mean, that's become so important to him. We pray for those who are not well or who passed away. But the other thing I just started with Adam, my 9-year-old grandson, I bought a book, which I want to talk to you about on Wednesday, about Midrash for little kids.
Mhm.
So now on Saturday morning, Eric and I sit down and I've shown him I have a little miniature Torah. So I've explained that to him and the part of what we're reading. And there's a specific story with questions at the end that are just right for that middle school age. So now we've taken to Saturday morning Midrash.
I love it. So it's now a tradition of connectedness, whether that's through study, whether that's through interpersonal prayer, but also family is an important part of this for you. Absolutely. I love it. The other thing that I would put in there is that for many of us, if I ask you what is special about Shabbat, it may have to do with food, right? Whether it's the same food that you eat week in, week out. I know that during the pandemic, there has been this beautiful tradition of many people sharing chalot with each other on Fridays. And there is this notion of an interpersonal change on Shabbat. And I think that when we talk about rest, maybe part of what we're talking about is giving ourselves this restoration. And maybe part of what we're talking about is the autonomic system, but we're using different words. So I think it's incredible the way that all of this fits together. Okay, we're going to continue forward. Snapshots and being in the present. And I did want to share with you, this is a kind of a midrash. This is by Lawrence Kushner. And it was the best example that I could think of Jewishly about savoring snapshots and being in the present. The burning bush was not a miracle. It was a test. God wanted to find out whether or not Moses could pay attention to something for more than a few minutes. When Moses did, God spoke. The trick is to pay attention to what is going on around you long enough to behold the miracle without falling asleep. There is another world right here within this one whenever we pay attention. So again, that the idea is not that the miracle is that this was God in the bush and the bush being unconsumed, but rather the miracle was that Moses paid attention. So again, I'm interested, what does it feel like when you pay attention, when you are in the moment? What does it feel like to you? Yeah, Randy.
Okay, there we go. When I'm in the synagogue listening and praying, it really gets me to focus and pay attention. And that means other things. There's no room for other things. There's no room for anxiety and worry and planning and all the things I would normally be thinking about. It just puts me right in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you, John.
I think that's exactly what, part of what we're going for is that it's designed to bring us into a place of focus. Earlier this week, I guess it was last week, maybe already, we had a wonderful Shiva Minyan training, which you might think is sort of, morbid, but I will tell you, I got off of that training and we had been so focused and in such a strong place. I got off and I was catching my breath. I was so excited to be working with other people and to be focusing together and really to be thinking on a very specific level. Well, I might even call it a flow state, right? That when we get so focused on something that it changes the way that we're thinking about the world. And again, it changes the way we breathe, it changes the way we interact. Anything that you can think of Jewishly that encourages you to enter that kind of state?
There's an entire tradition of Jewish meditation, which
Absolutely.
I've practiced and also taught at my former temple for like 20 years. And it's so meaningful.
I think that's right. I think Mark Young would probably agree with you on that too. Yeah. Yeah, he's not. Yes, nodding. Excellent. Good. Yeah, Nora.
I think that I get like that when I have conversations with people one-on-one, when you are actively listening to the other person. And I've been in that situation oftentimes with individual congregants. I get into their story and into that conversation. Just listening to what they have to say. I had that with Michelle recently in the office. We were just talking and listening to each other's stories. There's nothing better
Absolutely.
than just listening to what what other people have gone through. And you're just lose where you are and what else you have to do and what the rest of the day is about. And you just get lost in that moment of conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's a part of what Pam and Jen have been talking about also, that being a part of community opens us up to opportunities to have those kinds of in-depth conversations, to have the kinds of connections that we might not encounter in other places. If any of you are familiar with the theologian Martin Buber, it's the opportunity to engage the thou of the other person rather than the it, right? To break away from the transactional relationship and really engage in something deeper than that, right? And acknowledging what is godly in the other person. So I think that's right, Nora. Beautiful. All right.
I think Jewish music also, when you talked about what Jewishly do we
Absolutely.
have to help us pay attention, I think for many of us that is music, and I think that's why so many people are emotionally attached to a specific tune of a prayer, because if that's how they know the prayer, they find it harder to pray what they feel like the prayer should be in a different tune. It's not the prayer anymore. So I think that attachment to a tune and to music is a way that we pay attention.
Absolutely. And I know that in a few weeks, Gilad Cohen will be speaking to us a lot about the way that polyvagal theory and music engage with each other. And I do think about that, Stacy, also. The way that, and many of you have said this to me before, for example, after a Friday night service, how many of you have a tune from that service or from a Jewish song in your head, and it lasts almost until the next week when we get to refresh it again, and that there is something to carrying. It's like Havdalah that way, to carrying that sense with you of the restfulness and peace into the week. So I absolutely agree with you, Stacey. Okay. All right, I'm going to continue a little bit. The next way that we can engage in our polyvagal theory, we nurture glimmers and optimists. And I couldn't help, I had to put in some snarky Jewish joke. I'm an optimist. Things will get better. I'm a Jewish optimist. Things won't get worse. So, okay. But there is a lot in Judaism that inspires optimism, that encourages optimism, that requires optimism. And I think when we talk about the future, which we do all the time, we think about optimism. I also think, especially in Reform Judaism, there is something that we talk about, which is a messianic age, right? That we have this notion that we are headed towards progress, that we are going to get to a point, or at least we work to get to a point when things will be peaceful, right? And when things will be complete and whole. And there is, in other forms of Judaism, certainly a sense of Messiah that does something similar. But I would argue that one of the things that Reform Judaism does is that it brings that optimism into our lives, that each of us has the opportunity to improve the world, to get things to an even better place. And so I wanted to think a little bit about tikva, which is, as you know, hopefully from the Israeli national anthem. Hatikva is the hope, and it comes from the verb kava. It describes the act of combining multiple strands and coiling those into a single, much stronger cable. I want us to think about that for a moment, that this source of this word for hope has to do with combining strands to make them stronger. And how profound that can be Jewishly when we talk about each of ourselves as a strand, and when we talk about our community as the combining of those strands to make each of us stronger and to make the future stronger. Okay, it's derived from strong cable making sense. The nouns kav and kava mean line or measuring line. The noun tikva means cord. So we're back to music to a certain degree, by the way. And the exactly identical noun, tikva, means hope. Makeva also means hope, and kavkav means might or strength. Okay, So I just wanted to point those out. And then I do want to keep going a little bit. We have a lot. This next one is near and dear to my heart, and this is compassion. A religious man is a religious person who holds God and people in one thought at the same time, at all times, who suffers harm done to others, whose greatest passion is compassion, and whose greatest strength is love and a defiance of despair. And I want you to think, and it's fun to see Dana Weeks on this call, whose son is in my family school class, and of course Nora Berger, whose daughter teaches with me, and Jen Coles, and I thought we've got a lot of people who are affiliated with family school. And there are words that we learn in family school, and the truth is that almost all of them come back to the notion of compassion. So we could do this pop quiz style, but I will try not to put too much stress or pressure on anyone. B'Tselem Elohim means in the image of God. And it has to do with this notion that we all have something of God within us, and therefore we all deserve dignity and compassion. Tikkun Olam is the repair of the world. Gemilut Chasadim are acts of love and kindness. Tzedakah is righteousness. But this all has to do with recognizing the humanity of other people and turning it into action. And I think that each and every one of you on this call, on this Zoom, and I like that I know so many of you know what it means, that it's not to say that we do good things because it makes us feel good physically, but it is true that when we do acts of compassion, we do feel better, right? And it is an additional motivation, right? We have a moral obligation, and I think we have a physical motivation to do good in the world and to act in ways that are compassionate. So I think that is worth looking at as well. Okay. Now, as I said, there are a lot of other components that activate our hold on, I'm gonna get the words right, our autonomic system. There we go. I keep writing it down. One of these days, it's gonna be automatic to say autonomic. It's gonna happen. Okay. So that on Sunday, March 21st, we're going to be working with Gilad Cohen. I know that many of you have worked with him before. He's extraordinary, and he's going to be talking with us about music. Dana Weeks, who incidentally doesn't have any pictures of her online as Dana Weeks, is going to be talking with us about stillness on April 11th. And we will have a nature walk, which we have not been able to do for a long time now, but we'll be doing that on April 18th, and taking in nature and thinking about the ways that Judaism and nature also serve to improve our lives, to improve our autonomic systems. So before I sort of close things up, because I realize I'm 15 minutes early, so I want to take a step back and go back to that first question that I asked, which is, what do you think? Do you think that it goes, that Judaism, by its own nature, taps into these autonomic strengthening devices? Or do you think that because we've been through so much as Jews, we have found ways to strengthen ourselves through our culture and our faith? What do you think? Which way does it run? Yeah, Randy?
Both.
But, well, yeah.
If we didn't have the mechanisms that we use to strengthen ourselves, we might not be where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
So it just the fact that it's there is going to be reinforced. It's kind of like natural selection. Those who go through these kind of things, pogroms, the Holocaust, all sorts of other stuff, things from early on, and we always seem to be the downtrodden, and yet we find a way to survive and to flourish.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Thank you. So I mean, I think I was I'm sort of moving in that direction also, right? That it goes both ways. And I'm interested, and I don't want to ask anyone to be vulnerable who doesn't feel like they are in a place where they want to be vulnerable, but is there something Jewishly that you feel strengthens you, refreshes you, gives you a new way to heal either something that we've talked about or something that we haven't? Yeah, Cantor.
So it's very convenient that I can answer this question with a tremendous amount of honesty and plug my live stream this night in one answer. But I do really feel like the wordless melodies, the nigunim from the Hasidic discipline, and Hasidic traditions are spiritual traditions that belong to all Jewish people, not just those who prefer to wear darker colored garments. I think that has a tremendous power of healing and a tremendous ability to access the soul that we get from activating the polyvagal system, and segueing our nervous system into the autonomic one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there will be quite a lot of examples in this evening's broadcast. So I hope you'll check it out. It's on Facebook at 8 p.m.
I hope people join in. Absolutely. Yes, Pam.
I was going to say it was in one of the first slides you put up, and it was so interesting that there was a little phrase that said, I find joy from being with people. And just I mean, I've been studying polyvagal for about 2 years now, and I use it, every day. And for me to see that it's written in my Jewish faith, just, I don't know chicken egg. I can't really tell you. I just know that there's always a sense of comfort when what you believe is what you think and what you think is what you believe. And so I think even as Cantor's saying, the idea that you can hum along with ancient melodies, that's polyvagal. So I don't know which came first, chicken or egg. I mean, probably, I'm sure, I don't know, the melodies came first. There's a comfort and there's a glimmer. I think that's savoring a glimmer too, to know that things fit together a bit.
Well, and I also think it's interesting that both you and Cantor pointed out that there is a kind of a spiritual integrity in your Judaism, right? Cantor started out by saying, I like that I get to be honest in saying this. And Pam, you said something about that too. It sounds to me like there is something about spiritual integrity that also bolsters us. And that's a really interesting idea that I hadn't thought about before. Cantor, was there something else you wanted to say before?
Yeah, I'll be very brief this time. Just a food for thought, very much related to what you're talking about. So the Shema is in fact a haiku. It follows the timing rules that one would apply to a Japanese haiku. And so was there, did a 4th century Japanese poet step into a time machine and go into the Middle East?
Clearly.
Or do they both take advantage of something intrinsic in human biology in terms of how we might respond to a certain number of syllables?
Yeah.
And what kind of headspace might that put us in if those syllables are ones that call our attention to reality in a very purposeful way?
Thank you.
Maybe there's some underlying principles there.
Sure. Helene and then Nora.
So I was going to just mention on a personal note, 2 things I think in Judaism. The first is the whole notion of sitting Shiva and the sense of community. So I know personally for me, sitting Shiva and having people around me and that whole notion was extremely helpful for me. And the second comment I just was going to make is the whole idea of community prayer and maybe going back to the origins of a minyan even. I mean, I was on the live stream for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it was great. But for me, sitting in my family room alone, it was not the same as the sense of community sitting in the sanctuary, which hopefully we'll get to again.
Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help, right? Absolutely. Thank you, Helene. I think that's right. And I think that's been one of the challenges, if I can, again, sort of combine some of these notions, being together, being able to harmonize, to vibrate together, is one of those things that we love to be able to do. It's one of the things I think that's made and has been pointed out to me that has made this year as challenging as it is. But yeah. Nora?
I think that a lot of, whether it's Jewish or human nature, I think it all comes down to what, like Pam said, chicken or egg. For me personally, it it's what I learned first. And when I need it most, I go back to what was instinctual. I've gone through a long journey of whether I believed or what I didn't believe, how far I've come. I started out as a yeshiva kid, and when I needed it most, I either go back to the old tunes that I learned in yeshiva, or in the songs that go through my head when I needed them most, and the last lines of the Adon Olam, or the jokes that I learned when I, and the reading of the Shalom Aleichem stories. You start out and you go back, and that's what's comforting to you. And if it's old humor or songs, that's what brings us, the release and the relaxation, and it helps. It helps all along.
Yeah, Lynn, and then Stacy.
Quick beginning to the story. When my daughter was about 10, she and I took a tour of England. And for some reason, wherever we were stopping, there was a plaque. In 11 something, Jews were massacred here. And then we go somewhere else. Jews were massacred. And, after walking around, she looked at me and she went, "What's with this?" But my go-to with her, and now with my grandson, that the heart of Judaism is to life, that everything is about to life, and that's what I've taught her. And even Kaddish, my husband passed away unexpectedly when I was in Scotland with the rest of the family. I had to come back and prepare a funeral, but it was the idea that there was humor that I was able to transmit to this standing room only. And the other thing is, right now there's this big thing about everybody's a victim. Every group is being victimized. We're like the uber victims, but yet we're not. It's to life. It's the, the joy of being alive. I think that is so incredible.
Right. Although I have to say, so in my head, the Jewish joke is we were victims before being victims was cool. But no, it's a bad joke. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, Stacy.
Yeah, so there were two things when you talk about in terms of what Jewishly helps me. One is absolutely music. And unlike when I brought the example of that people are familiar, certain tunes are very, for me, it's very much about what's new in Jewish music. What's the new tune for this? And I find myself listening to Jewish music even more now during this time that I can't hear it live. And so I find it very helpful. And the other, and this probably isn't a surprise for those of you who've known me for a long time, is ritual, right? There's a reason that I keep being pulled back into ritual committee, because I love ritual. The choreography of prayer is constantly fascinating to me. Ian's family is not Jewish, and I find that going to a Catholic service, what appeals to me about the service is the ritual, and watching the people there know the ritual. They know the steps to the dance. I don't know the steps to the dance, but I can still see that they're beautiful. And so the ritual of Jewish practice, which has been very hard, again, right? My ritual has changed. I have to force myself to stand up when we're supposed to stand up. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I turn. So, but that whole thing in terms of Jewishly is something I've both held on to and something I've lost in this year.
Joel, and then Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, for Cheryl and I, as we travel around the world, which we've done for many years now, so whether we're in France or Bulgaria, or maybe we go to Vermont, we always make it a highlight of our trip to stop into a synagogue, wherever we are in the world. And it's almost like a Sabbath, because in the busy vacation, could be in the middle of the week and lots of things are happening and you're trying to figure out where to go next. Stepping into a synagogue, it's just like your moment of rest. It's your moment to contemplate. And I don't know if I could actually put it into words, but it makes us feel really good. It makes us feel at home. even though we could be thousands of miles away. So we always stop into a synagogue. So, and when you do that over a lifetime, it's hundreds of synagogues we've stopped into all over the world.
And so, and Joel, I have to say, like, it's fascinating to me that you as an architect, it's the building, right? That speaks to you and what happens within the building. I think that.
Yeah, I have a lot of trouble with Herschel's concept that it's time, not place. I like place.
I understand. Mark?
Hi. Let's go back to the beginning. Have a Bereshit moment.
Sure.
In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. Everything begins with sound. Sound, all creation comes from sound, and now physics has proven that. I mean, everything is vibration. But the thing is, someone many years ago told me the three most powerful things in the universe are sound, gems, and herbs in that. But sound is the most important thing because it's the building block of everything else in the universe. And so when a person meditates on a mantra, and it could be any source of a mantra. Lots of people I've heard use, some people say Om, but some people use Shalom as a mantra or any other word that suits them. But the thing is, it resonates with the nervous system. It's not just accidental. I mean, if you use a really complex word to meditate with, it may not work as well as a simple word. So if any of you, we all have time these days, so want to try to meditate, try too hard. Just have a word that resonates with you and just sit down, close your eyes, and start repeating that and see what happens. Sound is powerful and it's good for the nervous system.
Exactly. And one more, Arlene. Hold on, you're muted, love.
I wanted to make comments on two of the past speakers. So the woman who grew up in the yeshiva, I know that when I get very stressed and very sad and feel like I can't, go forward, I do sing that song, Sim Shalom, which I don't know all the words. And when I grew up going to B'nai Jeshurun, I don't know if anyone knows that, on 89th Street between West End and Broadway and 88th Street. And when I was confirmed, that was the song that I had to sing in front of the main temple. So 13, many years ago. And it is a different dialect that the temple here sings it in. So it is a little tricky with the like R's or S's or T's or something different. So I know what she means, that our early, Jewish prayers do really ground us, I think, and give us hope. And then what the couple before, the gentleman who's the architect, what he spoke of.
Yeah, Joe.
I love that idea of when you travel to go to see the synagogue, because years ago when I was, able to travel before I had my twins, I was always going to, Italy and Greece and France, and I was always hanging out in the churches to see the artwork, from the Renaissance or pre-Renaissance or Northern, that's what, and I never thought to go to a temple, or a synagogue. So I love that idea because the architecture is also important to me, the form, and through, Gothic and continued, it's just, it's a lovely idea. And Jane's husband, Mark, what was the second word that you said after Om? Because I've started meditating and the sound sort of clicked off.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. People, some people use shalom if their tradition is Jewish. I mean, shalom is a beautiful word. Actually, I guess the idea is to stay away from guttural sounds. Like gaga might not be a great mantra, because it's got hard sounds in it. But shalom, any word that has a nice, it washes over you, and you could use your mother's name, you know, if your mother's name was Darla or something like that, you know, you can use, but the thing is, just don't try too hard. And if you find yourself going off that word that you're sitting with your eyes closed and repeating, just don't make yourself wrong. Just come back to it, and for half an hour do this, and you might find you have a really pleasant experience. And it's just so easy. Jane and I have been meditating for somewhere in the 40 to 45 year
Something
range.
like that.
We both learned back in the 70s when we were in college. And
Right.
it's just like we don't do it every day, but we sure do love it when we do.
And Mark
And
is a TM teacher also.
right. And it's just a beautiful experience.
But
And
I also wanted to mention Shema. A lot of people, I have also meditated with Shema upon occasion.
that's a great one.
So I just want to point out, I know that we are a little bit over time, and Rich, I'm coming back to you, so don't worry. But I just want to let people know that there was not a pre-survey for this particular session, but there is a post-survey. It should be in your email already. Please, please, please take the time to fill it out. And I do, before I invite Rich to say his part, I want to thank everybody who is here today, everybody who shared, everybody who listened, and everyone who recognized the holy in the people who are in this moment with us. So thank you to all of you. And with that, Rich, what were you going to say?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say I agree with Helene that there's a real sense of community. I had some personal issues years ago that I just felt a sense of people cared, and everyone seems to accept each other for what we are and who we are. And from people who've been around as long as we have or longer, from where we started to how much we've grown, we've always kept that sense of community.
That's brilliant. And I think that's the most wonderful place for us to land and to alight, as it were. So thank you to everyone, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Fill out your surveys. Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, everybody.